For 35 years, a killer took over the streets of France. He was only identified by the scars on his face. The police called him Le Grêlé, the scarred one. From the early 1980s to the late 1990s, he committed 5 murders and took advantage of more than 20 victims. He got away with his crimes for 25 years. He even appeared on a well-known French TV program back in 2019. The only clues he left behind were a leather jacket, a pair of jeans, and the marks on his face drawn in police sketches. Victims' families were left without answers, and investigators spent years chasing a man who was always one step ahead. Who was this serial killer? How did he manage to stay on the loose for decades? And how did his killing spree come to an end? This is the case of Le Grêlé, the 25-year manhunt that eventually ended in the most unexpected way. Paris, 1986. A normal day turned into a tragedy. It was Monday in the 19th arrondissement. 11-year-old Cécile Bloch lived with her parents and her brother. Like every morning, her parents left for work at 8. That day, the stairwell was dark. One of the 2 elevators was broken, the other jammed, a small detail, but later they would matter. At noon, Cécile's parents called home, as they did every day, but this time, there's no answer. They thought maybe Cécile was already out for school, or maybe she had taken the dog outside. They tried again, but still silent. Cécile's parents called her friend Janine, but she hadn't seen her since she never showed up at school, which made her parents worried and rushed back home. As soon as they arrived, the apartment was empty, except for their dog. They didn't find her school bag, which meant she must have left for school, but vanished on the way. The concierge helped search the building along with the neighbors. They moved from floor to floor, from their apartment floor all the way down to the basement, where 3 storage units were there. They found that 2 were empty, but behind the 3rd door, horror was waiting. A rolled carpet was there. Beneath it, there was a small hand. It was Cécile's. She had been taken advantage of, killed, and thrown in the trash. The crime shook France. Who could do such a thing? Witnesses only remembered fragments: a polite man, a leather jacket, jeans, and scars on his face. From that day, he was called Le Grêlé, the scarred man. Back in 1986, when Cécile was killed, the police had almost nothing. No DNA results because the technology of DNA wasn't around yet. No digital tools either, just small clues. The case of Cécile turned cold with no real evidence and no legal statements. We're in front of a crime scene and a killer who's one step ahead. The story of the leather jacket man didn't end up just there. It was only the beginning. Cécile was only the first victim. April 7th, 1986, Place de Venise, Paris, where 8-year-old Sarah lives. Like every morning, Sarah left the apartment for school at 8:15 a.m. She stepped into the elevator. This time, someone was inside. A clean-shaven man with a leather jacket and a pair of jeans. His face marked with small scars. The elevator doors closed, and he rode down silently with the young girl. Suddenly, in one movement, he forced Sarah into the basement, where it was dark. The man tied Sarah on a mattress and wrapped a cord around her neck as she was fighting for air. While the man was forcing himself, footsteps echoed in the building. Someone was coming. The man panicked and escaped the scene. Sarah got up and stumbled upstairs, choking, terrified, and collapsed into her mother's arms. As always, the police are facing a very calculated criminal. The same statement: a scarred man wearing jeans and a leather jacket. Le Grêlé didn't wait for too long to escalate. 3 days later, 11-year-old Natalie was his next target. Natalie went shopping with her mother. She remembered she needed a calculator for school, but they didn't bring enough money. So she had to return home alone. She stepped into the elevator, and there he was, Le Grêlé. She pressed the button for the 6th floor, he pressed for the 3rd. When the doors opened, he pushed her out and dragged her under the staircase. His hand smothered her mouth, pushing her towards the basement. But again, footsteps. Someone's nearby, and like smoke, he disappeared. With each murder, Le Grêlé seemed to feed his obsession. Each crime became a rehearsal for the next, each more violent. The victim, this time, was Simone, a 14-year-old living in Paris's 11th arrondissement. He was celebrating his birthday with friends in his family apartment. The doorbell rang. It was a man pretending to be a neighbor asking them to keep the noise down. As soon as Simone opened the door, the man overpowered him and tied everybody there. The rest is too graphic to tell. The city of Paris hadn't recovered from Simone's crime when Le Grêlé struck again, only a few streets away, where the Politi family lived. It's 1987. Gil and Sylvie Politi are your typical middle-class, hardworking parents. To get help in taking care of their baby, they hired 20-year-old Irmgard Müller as their babysitter. The wife came home one evening to a terrible scene. 38-year-old Gil Politi and Irmgard Müller are both dead. Not just dead, but murdered. And again, it was Le Grêlé. One by one, the murders piled up, each one even more violent than the last. Apart from his last two murders, the victims had almost the same profile: underage white girls. What started as isolated incidents soon had turned into a murder spree. During all those years, somewhere in Paris, Le Grêlé was still plotting his next murder. Between 1986 and 1988, Paris lived through a wave of terror, 3 murders and 6 assaults in just over a year. As the victims' count was growing, police, detectives, journalists, and an entire nation wanted answers, but there were no true and solid evidence yet. Parents no longer trusted elevators. Children were kept inside, doors were locked, and windows were shut. The press gave him the name Le Grêlé. Witnesses all described the same person: clean-shaven, polite, leather jacket, jeans with small scars across the face. But knowing vague facial features was not enough. Police had no other evidence. For years, investigators worked on the case. Every crime scene showed the same pattern: a man who moved with confidence, who knew the buildings, and who left almost nothing behind. DNA samples were collected, but in the 1980s, the technology was too limited. Results took months, if not years, and by then, the killer was gone. At that point, the French government knew that this mission would take too much time and effort. Paris was facing a man who prepared his attacks, brought cords, used mattresses, and studied the buildings before striking. He looked like an ordinary man, someone who could pass as a neighbor or a family man, blending into daily life. Despite the efforts, the investigation went nowhere. Hundreds of men were questioned. Thousands of hours were spent on files, maps, and timelines. Every promising lead collapsed. Every suspect turned out to be the wrong man. Years became decades. Detectives grew old, retired, or passed away, while Le Grêlé continued his crimes. This time, the target is different. On June 6, 1990, in the quiet woods of Saint-Aubin near Paris, another body was discovered. The victim, Gilbert G., a 43-year-old industrial designer, had been tied to a tree, his arms cruelly bound in the shape of a cross, shot with a bullet. The public demanded answers, but the killer always stayed ahead. For over 30 years, Le Grêlé remained an identified face without a name, an open case without closure. But after decades of unanswered questions, the story of the scarred man was finally about to turn, all thanks to a young magistrate. While detectives and profilers almost gave up on the story, the young woman was not convinced that it's impossible to get the criminal. In November 2014, Nathalie Turki, a magistrate, was appointed as judge at the Tribunal Judiciaire de Paris. She was very sharp. She understood that there's something linked between all his crimes. Nathalie Turki asked for DNA tests. She saw the same pattern in the case. Witnesses and victims often said the killer looked and acted like a policeman, someone who knew the rules and even pretended to be part of the security services. Ballistics later showed that one of the murders had been committed with a Mac 50 pistol, a weapon used by a certain sector of police. The crime scenes also suggested a man who was disciplined. By 2014, DNA technology had improved enough to test old traces, so Nathalie ordered hundreds of former gendarmes who had worked in Paris during the 1980s and 1990s to give their DNA. She reopened the case and went back to hunting Le Grêlé. In September 2021, a formal invitation was sent to François Vérove. He wasn't a suspect yet. A few weeks later, results came back. The DNA from François Vérove was a perfect match with the DNA of Le Grêlé. François Vérove was a policeman in the late 80s to late 90s. As soon as the tribunal demanded him to come to an urgent investigation, he disappeared from his family. After not hearing back from him for about a week, his family launched a local search campaign. He was found dead after he deleted himself in a rental home. Next to him was a note, a full confession. The confession was the evidence that François Vérove was in fact Le Grêlé. I confess to being a great criminal who committed unforgivable acts until the end of the 90s. I hurt people. During that period, my life was not good. I am thinking of you and the victims' families. I am Le Grêlé. His wife and children had no idea he was one of the most dangerous serial killers in French history. His confession and the DNA match definitively closed the case files. However, because he was dead, there could be no trial. The victims and their families were denied their day in court. They would never get to face him or hear a public verdict. For some, it was a painful kind of justice, a sense of closure without a true resolution. For others, simply knowing his real name and seeing the mystery solved was enough. I guess at this point, the real question is, why did he do it? Many killers were born into trauma, abuse, and violence. But this is not the case of François Vérove. Le Grêlé had none of that. He grew up in an ordinary family and dreamed of becoming a motorcycle pilot, a dream that never happened. By all appearances, he was a protector of society, a regular husband, a father, and a man of order. Behind that uniform lived a serial killer, and the mask he wore was so perfect that for decades, no one suspected him. Back in 2019, he even appeared on national television on a famous game show and was introduced as a policeman, his first and only public appearance. So what turned François Vérove into Le Grêlé? Was it frustration or something else? The truth is, we may never know. If you're interested in becoming a YouTuber, whether a personal channel or a faceless one, we made a document to help you understand a few key points before you actually invest in YouTube. Click the link in the description. It's completely free. Subscribe and we'll see you on the next one.